What is an animal? Even though members of the animal kingdom are incredibly diverse, most animals share certain features that distinguish them from organisms in other kingdoms. All animals are eukaryotic, multicellular organisms, and almost all animals have a complex tissue structure with differentiated and specialized tissues. Most animals are motile, meaning they can move, at least during certain life stages. All animals require a source of food and are, therefore, heterotrophic, ingesting other living or dead organisms. This feature distinguishes them from autotrophic organisms, such as most plants, which synthesize their own nutrients through photosynthesis. As heterotrophs, animals may be carnivores, herbivores, omnivores, or parasites. Most animals reproduce sexually, with the offspring passing through a series of developmental stages that establish a fixed body plan. The body plan refers to the morphology, structure of an animal, determined by developmental cues. Animals vary in complexity and are classified based on anatomy, morphology, genetic makeup, and evolutionary history. Features used to classify animals. Body symmetry. At a very basic level of classification, true animals can be largely divided into three groups based on the type of symmetry of their body plan: radially symmetrical, bilaterally symmetrical, and asymmetrical. Radial symmetry is the arrangement of body parts around a central axis, like rays on a sun or pieces in a pie. Radially symmetrical animals have top and bottom surfaces, but no left and right sides or front and back. The two halves of a radially symmetrical animal may be described as the side with a mouth, the oral side, and the side without a mouth, the aboral side. Bilateral symmetry involves the division of the animal through a sagittal longitudinal plane, resulting in two mirror image right and left halves, such as those of a butterfly, crab, or human body. Animals with bilateral symmetry have a head and tail, anterior versus posterior, front and back, dorsal versus ventral, and right and left sides. Animals that are asymmetrical show mostly bilateral or radial symmetry, but with an exception. For example, fiddler crabs have one claw that is significantly larger than the other. Narwhals have a tusk protruding from the canine tooth in the upper left jaw only. One specific subspecies of honey badger, Signata, has a second molar on the left side of their lower jaw, but not on the right. Or so they say. I'm not getting close enough to a honey badger to check. Complexity. Some animals are only organized into cells. Others have advanced to the tissue level of organization. Still others have organs and organ systems. As you study the different animal phyla, you will see the evolution of more complex patterns. We will study animals in order of complexity and evolutionary divergence. Every organism starts out as an embryo. The embryo has certain groups of cells called germ layers. Some animals start out with 2 germ layers, so they are referred to as diploblastic. Diplo means double, blastic means number of layers. Other animals start out with 3 germ layers, so they are referred to as triploblastic. Animals that are triploblastic are typically more complex and therefore advanced than animals that are diploblastic. 2 cell layers, simple. Some organisms have 2 kinds of tissues that develop in embryonic life. These tissues are the primary germ layers. If an animal has 2 germ layers, as shown on the left, it is said to be diploblastic. This results in an inside and outside. Such animals are hollow. 3 cell layers, fancy. Some organisms have 3 kinds of tissues that develop in embryonic life. If an animal has 3 germ layers, as shown on the right, it is said to be triploblastic. Such an arrangement allows for the formation of complex external and internal structures, like nails and organs. Respiration. All animals need to be able to get oxygen, O2, into their cells, and carbon dioxide, CO2, out of their cells. Respiratory systems enable the exchange of these gases between the environment and the body. The gases must be able to diffuse across a membrane, dissolve in water in order to diffuse. Simple animals allow gases to simply diffuse through their skin. Larger animals need more complex structures, like gills or lungs, to ensure they get enough O2 and get rid of enough CO2. All respiratory surfaces must meet the following minimum requirements: thin, moist, large blood supply, sufficient surface area for enough diffusion of gases. Animals that live in aquatic environments have some challenges. There is less free oxygen available in water than there is in air. Another problem is that water is more viscous, gloopy or oozy, than air is. The more viscous a liquid, the harder it is for gases to diffuse in and out of it. But terrestrial animals, those living on land, also have challenges. They need a lot more oxygen in order to stay alive because they tend to be more complex. And since they live on land, they lose a lot of water to evaporation. Remember, one of the requirements for respiration is that the membranes have to remain moist. So terrestrial animals have to be able to take in enough water to balance the water they are losing to evaporation. Circulation. The purpose of a circulatory system is to move O2 and nutrients to the cells and get CO2 and other waste products away from the cells. There are 2 main types of circulatory systems in animals: open and closed. In an open circulatory system, the fluid being circulated is not truly blood. It leaves the heart and flows into a large open space where it bathes the tissues. There are no capillaries, and there is no other fluid surrounding the cells. Arthropods and most mollusks have open circulatory systems. Most larger animals have closed circulatory systems. There's true blood, which travels through tubes, arteries, capillaries, and veins. The blood gets pumped to within a few microns of where it is needed. There is a separate fluid called interstitial fluid around the cells. Segmented worms, sea urchins, and animals with backbones are examples of organisms that have closed circulatory systems. Open systems have low pressures and aren't very efficient. There isn't even really blood. There's a combo fluid called hemolymph that counts for both blood and interstitial fluid. The hemolymph is slower to return to the heart than blood in a closed system. However, an open circulatory system works just fine for small animals. If it didn't, there wouldn't be so many cockroaches on Earth. Closed systems have higher pressures and deliver blood to the tissues faster. But the last few microns of gas exchange still have to happen by simple diffusion. Closed circulatory systems are good at keeping old and new blood separated, and true blood is required. You can tell this is an open circulatory system because the blood is flowing outside of vessels. In a closed system, true blood is always contained. Digestion. The purpose of digestion is to break food down into molecules that are small enough for the animal's cells to use. The 3 main types of molecules animals take in are proteins, carbohydrates, and lipids. There are 2 types of digestion, and most animals have to use both types. The first is mechanical digestion, which refers to breaking down large pieces of food into smaller pieces of food. No chemical change occurs. The reason animals perform mechanical digestion is to increase the surface area of the food so that when chemical reactions do occur, there's more space for them to happen. Chewing and the churning of a stomach are examples of mechanical digestion. The other type of digestion is chemical digestion. Chemical digestion is carried out by enzymes and sometimes other chemicals like acids. With this type of digestion, the molecules that come out are completely different from the starting molecules. Chemical digestion breaks proteins down into individual amino acids. It breaks starches into simple sugars, and it breaks fats down into glycerol and fatty acids. The reason animals perform chemical digestion is to get molecules that are small enough to be absorbed into the bloodstream. Fun fact, what you eat is the single most important factor in the design of your body. Various dietary options. Delicious detritus. Detritus is a polite word for dung and decaying matter. Detritus is made up mostly of dead plants and tiny animals that have broken down into bits. Detritus is a rich source of nutrients, much like fertilizer in a garden. Living animals contribute detritus when they deposit dung or drop off parts of their body, such as feathers and skin. Yummy plankton. Plankton is another popular food item. Plankton is made up of microscopic plants and animals that drift with the water currents. This includes algae, such as diatoms, as well as the tiny larvae of larger animals. Microscopic larvae drift with the currents to disperse to new places where they settle down and grow into large adults. Most, however, never make it to adulthood as they are eaten by plankton feeders. Plankton also comprises animals that remain microscopic all their lives, such as this copepod on the right. There are two main ways to eat detritus and plankton: deposit feeding and suspension feeding. Deposit feeders collect the particles that settle on the sea bottom. Buried worms gather detritus from the surface with their tentacles. Most sea cucumbers swallow and process sediments for detritus. Suspension feeders collect the bits suspended in the water. Peacock anemones use their tentacles to collect detritus suspended in the water. Filter feeders are suspension feeders that collect bits suspended in the water by actively creating a current of water through their bodies, or by using body parts as a sieve. Barnacles filter the water with their feathery feet, kicking the edible bits into their mouths. Sponges and clams filter feed by sucking water into their bodies and then sieving out the edible particles. Carnivores are flesh-eating animals. There are two main types of flesh eaters: predators and scavengers. Predators actively hunt, kill, and eat animals. Predators don't have to be large. An example of a small predator is the drill, a snail that eats barnacles. Scavengers don't hunt or kill. They simply eat any animals that are already dead. Scavengers include crabs and prawns. Herbivores eat plants. Almost every phylum and class has herbivores. Grazing is done with a radula, like in mollusks, and grinding tough plant food with molars, like a cow. These animals are not selective. Browsing is done by animals like monkeys, deer, and koalas. They choose specific plant items they prefer, like eating a certain leaf or fruit rather than the whole tree. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. They usually eat a wide variety of food. The wild boar is an omnivore, and so are we. Fluid feeders. Ugh. A wide variety of animals and insects are adapted to take in liquid food, either from plant or animal juices.